Imagine living next door to a man who greets you politely every morning, who speaks calmly, who appears respectable and helpful. Now imagine discovering years later that behind the walls of his home were the remains of multiple victims, and that he had even managed to send an innocent man to the gallows for his crimes. This is the chilling story of John Reginald Christie, the quiet man from London who turned a small house into one of the most infamous crime scenes in British history. The address was 10 Rillington Place, a modest building in Notting Hill during the difficult years following World War II. At first glance, it was just another overcrowded property where several families lived in small rented rooms. But inside those walls, a dark secret was slowly unfolding. John Reginald Christie was born in 1899 in Halifax, England. On the surface, his early life appeared ordinary. He grew up in a large household and did well at school. People described him as obedient, intelligent, and quiet. Yet beneath this calm exterior were deep insecurities that would shape the rest of his life. As a young man, Christie struggled socially and emotionally. Some of his early experiences left him humiliated and resentful, particularly in relationships with women. These feelings slowly transformed into a disturbing desire for power and control. After leaving school, Christie worked various jobs. He spent time as a cinema projectionist and later worked as a postman, but his life soon took a darker turn. He was caught stealing postal orders and was sent to prison. That conviction was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Christie drifted between jobs and frequently found himself on the wrong side of the law. He spent time moving through London's criminal underworld, associating with petty criminals and prostitutes. But by the time World War II began, Christie made a decision that would help him hide in plain sight. He wanted to appear respectable. He reunited with his wife, Ethel, and the couple moved to London. Eventually, they settled in a ground-floor flat at 10 Rillington Place in Notting Hill. To his neighbors, Christie seemed polite and responsible. He even joined the police reserve as a special constable during the war. This position gave him something he craved deeply: authority. Wearing a uniform and presenting himself as a law-abiding citizen helped him gain the trust of people around him. No one suspected the quiet man living downstairs was capable of anything sinister. But behind that image, Christie was already beginning his descent into murder. During the early 1940s, many women in London struggled to survive. The war had left countless families broken, and some women turned to prostitution to make ends meet. Christie often encountered these vulnerable women. In 1943, while his wife was temporarily away visiting family, Christie began seeing a woman named Ruth. She was an immigrant who had come to Britain hoping to train as a nurse, but had fallen into prostitution. She visited Christie at his flat regularly. At first, their relationship appeared to be transactional. But Christie soon began to worry that she might expose him when his wife returned. What happened next marked the beginning of a horrifying pattern. During one of their encounters, Christie strangled Ruth to death. Afterward, he hid her body beneath the floorboards of his home. For most people, committing such a crime would lead to panic, fear, or guilt. But for Christie, something far darker occurred. The act of killing gave him a sense of control he had never experienced before. And it would not be the last time. Not long after, Christie targeted another victim, a co-worker named Muriel. She trusted him and believed he was trying to help her with a health problem. Christie invited her to his flat and convinced her to use a device he claimed would treat her condition. Instead, it released gas that rendered her unconscious. While she was helpless, Christie assaulted her and then strangled her. Once again, he hid the body on the property. By this point, 2 victims had disappeared, yet no one suspected the quiet man living at 10 Rillington Place. But the most shocking chapter of this story was still ahead. In 1948, a young couple named Timothy and Beryl Evans moved into the flat above Christie. They were newly married and struggling financially. Soon they had a baby daughter named Geraldine. Life was difficult for the young family. When Beryl discovered she was pregnant again, panic set in. They could barely afford to care for the child they already had. Christie learned about their situation. He approached them with what seemed like a solution. He claimed he knew how to perform abortions safely, something illegal at the time but desperately sought by women who felt they had no other option. Trusting their neighbor, Beryl agreed. One day, while Timothy was away at work, Christie carried out the procedure. But Beryl never came back. When Timothy returned home, Christie told him something terrible had happened during the operation. He claimed Beryl had died accidentally. Instead of going to the police, Christie convinced the frightened young man that reporting the death would lead to prison for both of them. Then Christie proposed a plan. He would dispose of Beryl's body, and Timothy should leave London temporarily. Confused, frightened, and easily influenced, Timothy followed his advice. But Christie had already made another horrifying decision. Soon after, Timothy's baby daughter Geraldine was also murdered. When Timothy eventually contacted the police, the investigation quickly turned against him. His inconsistent statements and lack of education made him appear unreliable. Meanwhile, Christie calmly presented himself as a helpful witness. The bodies of Beryl and the baby were eventually discovered on the property. Yet incredibly, suspicion fell entirely on Timothy Evans. At trial, Christie testified against him. The jury believed the calm, respectable neighbor over the confused young father. Timothy Evans was found guilty. In 1950, he was executed, but the truth was far more disturbing. Christie had successfully framed an innocent man for murder. And after Evans was gone, Christie continued killing. Over the next few years, several more women disappeared after visiting his home. Some came seeking abortions. Others were simply vulnerable individuals looking for help or shelter. Each time, Christie used the same methods. He would lure them into his flat, render them unconscious using gas, assault them, and then strangle them. The bodies were hidden inside the house, in walls, cupboards, and beneath the floorboards. By the early 1950s, Christie had murdered multiple women inside the same small building. Then, in December 1952, something unexpected happened. His own wife became suspicious. Their relationship had grown tense, and she may have begun to realize the truth about what her husband had been doing. Christie reacted in the only way he knew. He strangled her. Her body was hidden beneath the floorboards of their home. Now completely alone, Christie spiraled further into violence. In a short period of time, he murdered several more women. But the house was beginning to reveal its secrets. The smell of decay became noticeable to neighbors. Christie eventually abandoned the property and disappeared. Shortly afterward, a new tenant began renovating part of the flat. While removing wallpaper from a kitchen alcove, he uncovered something horrifying. Behind the wall were hidden human remains. Police rushed to the scene. This time, investigators searched the entire property. What they discovered shocked the entire country. The quiet home at 10 Rillington Place had been transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. The hunt for John Reginald Christie began immediately. He had vanished, but not for long. Within days, he was found wandering the streets of London. When confronted with the evidence, Christie eventually confessed. The truth finally came out. Not only had he murdered several women, but his crimes had led directly to the wrongful execution of Timothy Evans. Christie was arrested, tried, and convicted. In 1953, he was executed for murder. But the revelations from the case sparked outrage across Britain. Many people believed the justice system had failed terribly by executing an innocent man. The case became one of the most famous examples of wrongful conviction in British history and eventually contributed to debates that led to the abolition of the death penalty in the United Kingdom. Today, the house at 10 Rillington Place no longer exists. It was demolished years ago. But the story continues to haunt criminal history, not only because of the murders, but because an innocent man paid the ultimate price for crimes he did not commit, and perhaps the most unsettling question remains this: if the truth had never been discovered behind those walls, would the world ever have known who the real killer was?